Welcome everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get started since we're on kind of a tight timeline. I'll share my screen with you in just a moment so you can kind of see our introduction, but I just want to remind everybody, if you are interested in getting sketches, to please be sure to put your name in the chat just in case there's some issue later. So if you could just go ahead and drop your name in the chat really quickly as we're letting everybody else in and getting started. That way we'll make sure you get your sketches later. All right. So we just want to welcome everyone. We are the Giants team. So I am Lindsay Benzel. I teach 3rd grade in Grand Haven Area Public Schools. Joy Coyer teaches 3rd grade in Holland Public Schools and also is on the board for MCSS. And then we are so fortunate because Phil is also on the 3rd grade Giants team. And if you know Phil, you know he has many, many hats and many, many roles. So we're really lucky to get to work with him, and he's a great resource for all of us on our project. Joy, can you manage the waiting room? I see there's a couple other people who popped in.
I'm on it. Yeah.
So as we get started, to kind of get to know each other, we thought we could do a little inclusion activity around, we know this year has been kind of crazy and we've all been trying to make the best of everything. So if you could in the chat, drop a little note to share with us a pandemic superpower you've developed. So one hidden skill that I've uncovered over the last few months is I've learned that I can build a document camera out of literally anything in my house, a can of soup, a box of spaghetti. So go ahead and drop in the chat, what are some hidden talents or skills you've uncovered since we've entered the pandemic? So it looks like people have really developed some brand new skills. Oh, another skill, deflecting distractions. Go ask Natty, okay? A slushy run, yoga, singing Wheels on the Bus, that's a good one. So lots of great new skills and superpowers that we've developed in kind of this really crazy year. And I know as we're kind of working through our meeting today, if there are any technology snafus or interruptions, we just want to thank you ahead of time for your patience. So let's take a quick look at our agenda and then we'll get started. So we're going to go through a trade story to talk a little bit about the 3rd grade Michigan history curriculum. And then we'll look at an activity from Phil about historical quotes. And then Joy will kind of wrap us up with some information about trade books and children's literature. Our hope is that when you leave this session, you'll have some ideas for how you might incorporate storytelling with your students as you're teaching them social studies. So just so you know, these next few slides are really kind of student oriented. So this is an activity that you might take your students through. So you're going to be the students and assuming that role as we kind of move through this. Our project really aims to help kids think about stories in a different way. So instead of just reading a book, really thinking about using a picture or a map as a story. So one way we might start a story about trade in Michigan is we might show students an image like this and then ask them, what do you notice? And then we might give them a prompt and let them know the Indigenous woman in the picture is probably boiling sap to create maple sugar. So on the next slide, This is like, again, this is a student-friendly PowerPoint, so they could list their questions right here on this document if you're teaching remotely, or you might create a chart for your students in the classroom. But really just getting them to kind of share some of their noticings, just so you can kind of see like what they know already and what they're really curious about. So then the next layer is you might introduce a map to kind of show students where some resources in Michigan are located. And hopefully your students will be familiar with some of these resources already and will have some of these maps internalized. But so your next step might be to add a layer to the story and share with them a map resource, and then ask them, where could this woman live? Here is a map of where pine forests are located. And then there's also a map that shows where hardwood trees are located. And then you might give them a couple of locations to pick from and really prompt them to support their answer with reasons, so that they're really thinking critically about possibilities for where this woman could live. And again, there's a slide here so that if you wanted to use this with students, they have a spot where they can answer. So one thing we really like to do is once we've given kids a little bit of a brain teaser, we like to kind of make that connection to geography. So on this slide, you'll see there's a link for the clickable maps that we use often with our students in the Giants program. And so you can kind of push your students to explore some other resources that this woman might have in her location. And then that way they're really building those critical thinking skills, thinking about all the conditions in a place. So really looking at a place through many different lenses. And then just again, prompting them, like, what are some resources she might still need? And a lot of these questions could also serve as an informal assessment. If you're asking kids about the best location or resources they might still need, that will give you some information about what your students already know about Indigenous life and about the conditions in a certain place. The next layer to the story is really the idea of trade. So on this slide, you might show students this photograph and then ask them, again, what are you noticing? Hopefully they came up with the idea that where this woman lives, she may not have all the resources she needs available to her. And so then you could introduce this idea of trade, that many Indigenous people traded to get all the things they wanted and needed to help make their lives better. So you might talk a little bit about this canoe, how it's made, or where they may have gotten the birch bark to create this canoe. And then again, a map link just to help them build that geographical understanding. And this slide is a little bit complicated, but basically what it shows is different villages. So there's the Odawa villages and the Ojibwe villages. And then you're going to ask students to talk about where might a trading post be? Like which locations make sense for people to come together to trade. And this really links in with an activity we have at the beginning of the Giants units, where students are really talking about and analyzing the best place to build a village. And it also connects to another resource we use, which is a primary source about a trader named Alexander Henry. So this kind of layers in some of the understandings you've been building if you're using the Giants program over the last few weeks. And then lastly, there's this trading post picture, and this really has lots of opportunities that you could really get your kids excited and engaged with. So before I kind of go over some of the ways you might use this picture, you can just go ahead and drop in the chat. What are some ways you think you could use this picture to kind of spark a conversation with your kids or help them build some understanding around Indigenous life? So if you want to just drop an idea or two in the chat, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about some ideas that are listed. So if you're able to read through some of the ideas on the slide, this could be a really great opportunity to talk about some vocabulary. It's also a great opportunity to get kids thinking about items that we don't use anymore, or items that they kind of take for granted. I think a lot of kids are surprised to know that they didn't necessarily have pots back then. They had to trade for them or make them out of clay. So this is a really great picture for kids to really spark some thinking. And it's connected to a detailed activity set with some more questions and a PowerPoint. So if you wanted to explore this further. So before we move on to the next section, what questions or wonderings might you have about just the idea of telling a trade story through photographs, maps, and images? And you can drop your question in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can. So I will share the slides with you all. So if you want to use this activity with your students, you can. And I believe there's a link at the end with just a clean version of the slideshow, so it doesn't have the extra slides on it. So I'll share this with you in the chat if you'd like to use it with your students. And then we'll move on to, I believe, Joy is next, or Phil. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part, and I'll share this with you. So if you want to use this with your students, you can.
Well, that would be me on, and you should see something that says perspectives. The Giants website has got a lot of resources that can help us tell the story of early Michigan. And in this section, I'm talking about resources, not about lessons, things that can support a lot of other lessons. So let's read something together. Quotations could be a resource. And then let's put on our thinking caps and try to figure out who said this. Was this an indigenous person, a European explorer, a Catholic missionary, a fur trader, a soldier, somebody else? We're trying to identify the perspective of this quote. So here's an example. We call the people together and we kneel down and say a prayer. Some of the people, mainly the little ones, already know it. They say the prayer with us. Then everyone sits down. Who said this? Now, what I'm showing is simply the PowerPoint that is up on the Giants website. But it's got two versions of this quotation. The original quotation was a little bit longer, and we give you that one too. Maybe you think it's too long or has too many unfamiliar words, but you might think that Paternoster could be a teachable moment. You could ask in your class, does anyone know what this is? If not, let's read another sentence. Maybe we can learn what it might mean. That's an ELA strategy. Yeah, it's a prayer. In short, you can translate the longer one in as much as you want into simpler terms, because this was originally translated from the French anyway. You can do your translation or just use our shorter version of this. Here's the point. Your keyboard has a delete key. It does not have a create key. And Giants tends to give you the long parts of things, and then you can use delete to simplify it down to what you want. Unless, of course, you want the longer reading activity, or you want the chance to make your own translation. So here's another quote. Some other Frenchmen went along the Black River. They said they saw a big piece of copper. It weighed more than 800 pounds. They said the Indians made fires on top of it. What perspective does this quote show? And you can have that as a discussion. You can have it as individual students making a decision and trying to persuade each other. In other words, we're not telling you how to run the class. We're giving you the resources to run the class. This happened to have been written by a French explorer in 1664. And to support quotes like this, Giants has a lot of photos and diagrams, like this of native copper from the Keweenaw area of the Upper Peninsula. And a map activity. Can you find the Keweenaw Peninsula on your desk map? Oh, here it is. Now, how would you tell someone else where it is? This is the important step in learning geography, is translating it into your own words. The clickable map also has a button to show metals, and now you can see that the Keweenaw is just filled with copper ore. Another quote. We built a fort with high walls, logs 15 feet long. The logs have sharp points on top. We put the fort on high ground, right next to the river. It's about 10 miles north of Lake Erie. What perspective does this quote show? Came from Lamothe Cadillac, the commander of the fort, in a report to the French governor. He went on to build another fort at Michilimackinac. The drawing shows what he called Fort Pontchartrain de Tourcoing. Notice the canoes in the Detroit River up in the foreground. And we can make a map activity. Let's name the lakes and then find a spot next to a river about 10 miles away from Lake Erie. Another example. And you could have your students read this. You could have it a read together. Again, we're not telling you how to run the class. It's just a resource. This particular one came from a speech by a Potawatomi elder near the St. Joseph River. And we put Fort St. Joseph on the map of Potawatomi on the clickable map. And you can see it's completely surrounded by the Potawatomi villages. I'll give you the URL for finding that clickable at the end there. Another quote you could actually presage by showing them the picture ahead of time about beavers. This old drawing shows the different kinds of hats that Europeans made out of beavers. And this is why the traders from England and France wanted to buy beaver skins. So here's the quote. The beaver does everything for us now. It makes kettles, it makes hatchets, knives, cloth, bread. In short, it makes everything. A Huron warrior said this in 1634. About 100 and some years later, Pontiac is talking to a council of tribes, and he's saying, hear me now, this is what the Great Spirit said. Why don't you wear animal skins like your grandparents did? Why don't you use bows and arrows for hunting? I see you buying guns, knives, and blankets from the white man. Now you can no longer live without them. And this becomes a compare and contrast activity, if you want. Remember the quote that we just read about. There's a long quote that's an inventory of goods for sale this year. And we could tie it to the photo that Lindsay showed you a little while ago. As she said, a museum tells a story too. And the website has got a writing activity that's based on this photo. My last two quotes are from about 2 years apart. A guy named Eswick Evans said, in traveling more than 4,000 miles, I saw no place that looked as good as the Michigan Territory. The soil is generally fertile. Much of it is very rich. 3 years earlier, Edward Tiffin, the Surveyor General of a whole area called the Northwest Territory, said, in Michigan, there would not be more than 1 acre out of 100 that could be used for farming. Between the swamps and the lakes is a poor, barren, sandy land on which almost very few plants can grow except very small oak trees. So which one's right? Is Michigan fertile, very rich? Or is Michigan sandy, swampy? The answer is, of course, it's both. And the Giants package has got a lot of pictures of Michigan to let you show that. And you can look at the land from many different perspectives. I mean, two people can look at the sand dune and one of them says, this is terrible, it's no good for farming. And the other one says, this is great, it's a playground right next to the lake. In other words, it depends on your perspective. And one of the things we're trying to teach in ELA is how to interpret the perspective of something. So how can we use these old quotes? They're raw material. You can use one to start a lesson for the day about beavers or copper or priests or Detroit. You can use two to do a compare and contrast, a reading and writing activity. You can use three or four as a matching activity. You can use more of them in your review section, or make some into a practice DBQ. Giants has another story activity based on an old map. Here's a close-up of the Michigan part. It sort of looks like a mitten. The Giants website has downloadable versions of this map and several pages of questions. And the questions just provide a different and very engaging way to teach basic Michigan geography. How many Great Lakes does it show? What two Great Lakes is the lower peninsula between, and so on. They could do it on the desk map, they could do it on a wall map, or a great big floor map. We can show you how to get these maps. They're not expensive. A final kind of story activity uses the artifacts that are found in an old grave. These are pipestone. And the student's task is to find out that pipestone came from Minnesota and then figure out how you get a canoe from Minnesota to Michigan. And that's it for my part. I've briefly described some materials to help tell part of Michigan's story from different perspectives. Using historic quotations, I showed you about 1/3 of the quotations we've got on the website. Museum photos, old maps, old artifacts. So those are the URLs, and Joy is allowed to leave that up exactly as long as she wants to, and then click her share screen.
Thanks, Bill. One of the things I really like about those types of activities are just the way that it's so collaborative. You can do it independently, but you can also do it in a collaborative format. And I have found that it just really helps to help students to be critical thinkers, and they're excited if they got the person right. And you can just talk a little bit more about why did you choose that person when to match that quote, and get some of their reasoning behind it. So I my kids have really enjoyed uh, doing those types of activities that Phil has created. One of the things when we were working with the Giants and helping to write this curriculum was we wanted to really integrate uh, good literature with the current standards and with the social studies content. So that has been a challenge for us in a lot of ways, and we are always looking to add uh, reading resources for this, and we've tried to integrate articles along with some media resources through video, and also just always on the horizon of what are some new books. So I am going to share my screen with you, but I am also going to tell you where we're coming from. Um, you see these books right here? These were from the 70s. Okay. This is what we have. When you're looking about Chief Pontiac, I looked in this book, and I don't know if that's bright enough for you, but they're orange. Okay. So we're really trying to update some of the ELA resources that we have, um, and just kind of hook those teachers that do not feel um, confident in their social studies skills. So I'm going to just tell you some of the books that we have. I'm really excited. We've tried to do picture books along with chapter books here. So I am going to share my screen with you now. And I'm just going to talk about some of these books. The third grade focus, hopefully you can all see this. I'm going to move this thing around. Okay, the third grade focus is in the history of Michigan, and that's our main focus. And so, am I not? we've got Kathy Jo Warden. This is one thing that we have had to tackle. Kathy Jo Warden wrote a lot of books. Some of them you might be more familiar with. There are a lot of legends, and that's one of the issues that we ran into with the new curriculum standards, especially for third grade. The legends need to tie in specifically with the Anishinaabe, and we're also working with a specific timeline in here as well, because we take the curriculum up to statehood. And Kathy Jo Warden, a great author, and she has written a lot of legends, but when you go to vet them, they're not necessarily accurate accounts of the Anishinaabe. So we wanted to make sure that that was accurate for our third graders. And so some of the books, the Legend of the Ladies of the Slipper, Legend of the Petoskey Stone, excuse me, several of those legends, we've had to switch gears on that. But this was one book, and the Voyager's Paddle does talk about the fur trading industry. And in this book specifically, and I love this one part of it here, it has where this is an Ojibwe. He is intermarried into an Ojibwe. You can't see this very well, but so you have two different type of cultures coming together here: the French and now an Indigenous person from the Ojibwe tribe. So that is a really good. There's a lot of good settings there. A lot of the storyline is really in the very first scene of this book. You can see, and it's just a great way to talk about this a little bit, is where they're located. And you can see, I don't know how much you can see in this, but you can see like a fort. And then you can also see they're on the waterway. So you can talk about what's their main mode of transportation, and how they get their supplies from one location to another. Another one, this is probably the one we've struggled with the most. And this is an Ojibwe legend that is Shingabus. Shingabus it is a good legend. Also, one thing I should talk to you about is when you look at legends, there's a lot of good legends out there from the Anishinaabe, but are they third grade friendly? Okay, that's the other thing, because sometimes they're pretty grotesque. Some of the legends are. They're pretty graphic. And so you have to make sure that they're third grade friendly. So that's another one. So we're always on the lookout for that. So Shingabus is one that we have used to integrate as well. And then we have two others, Life in Anishinaabe Camp. This is a really good book. I love this book. It's got some really good pictures to go along with this. This author has also written some others about life in a longhouse village, and just there's some other books that you can use to compare and contrast, but this one is a really good one. They talk about how they create a wigwam, how they come together, and where they live in like summer versus winter. So it's really, you kind of get a good feel for that with that book in particular. And then M is for Mitten is another book that we use. Now, the way that we would use this, I would not sit here and read this book from cover to cover. I would not do this. I would pick out books in here. We use it as a way to point out the special geography that Michigan has. So we do a couple of these, and then we've also used S is for sunshine as just a way, and that represents the state of Florida. And we have pulled out maybe the Everglades or some different geographical areas there that we can use to compare and contrast to Michigan. So that's another one that we've used. These are just some things, if you were going to use this as a reading standard, I've just created for the Voyager's Paddle. These were some that you could use to incorporate. I know we're a lot of people are still getting those evaluations, and so we've kind of made it easy to tie in some of those reading standards along with social studies, and you can show how those are integrated together. So these are a couple of the reading standards that we can pull from these books, and we really tried to do that with each book that we have added to the Giants curriculum. So recounting stories, determining the meaning of words and phrases, and explain how specific aspects of a text's illustrations contribute to the story. Then we also tied into social studies standards, locate the natural resources in Michigan, describe how people are part of and adapt to and use modify the physical environment of Michigan. So those are just some pieces of it as well. And then that historical piece using primary and secondary sources to explain migration and immigration, how it affected and how it continues to affect the growth of Michigan. Vocabulary, we pulled some of these. This is all again from the Voyager's Paddle. Bands of ice, swift, interior, palisade, hides, plume, depart, rendezvous, get a little French in there. So just to pull some of those things out of it as well. Even examples of similes and examples of personification, a great way to tie those in with social studies as well. You can do this separate just as a read aloud earlier in the day, and then later on in the day when you are teaching social studies, you can pull this back out and draw from that. So it's kind of a win-win when you're using this for two things. One of the books that we really want to highlight is this book called We Are Water Protectors. I am so excited about this book. This is the newest Caldecott award-winning book for 2021. It is the first time an Indigenous person has won the Caldecott Award book. So that's really exciting. And when you read this book, it's a great picture book. It uses a lot of devices, literary devices, metaphors, similes, alliteration, personification. It talks about people from the past and the present. We as a state live in Michigan near all the water, so we certainly can relate to this. One of the things I do like about this, in the very back of this book is an oath. And you can see this, and I love that each student can take an oath. And it says the Earth Steward and Water Protector Pledge. And I will do my best to honor Mother Earth and all its living beings. And it just goes on, and where you can even print this out and each student can sign it. You can sign it and their date. It also gives you a lot of information on there in the glossary, adds some of the Anishinaabe, and it does talk about the people of the three fires, which is the Anishinaabe, and even some language of the Anishinaabe. And I love that as well. And so it's a lot of good resources. I know it's hard to see, but these last 2 pages really do give you a lot of information. So if you have not purchased this book, this is a great one. But if you have not checked it out, I have added on here, this is a read aloud link. So if you click on that, it will read that story to you out loud. And it's just a really good one to check out. So I was really excited to get this book and add this to our latest, that's our newest book that we've added. So I'm super excited about that. These are a couple other books that I want to highlight. I've already talked about Shinga, but I did want you to know this is a really cool book as well. And there is the American Indian Youth Literature Award. This award only, you only receive this award every other year. They only give this out every other year. And I love this book because not only is it, I mean, I've been teaching 3rd grade for 24 years. And over the years, you start to see, even though they're quality books, they can be award-winning books, but my students are going to go for, what does it look like? What does that cover look like? And if it's old and outdated, it doesn't matter what's in the inside. They're going to overlook that. So we really try to get books that are more modern and updated as well. But this book is really, really cool. Bow Wow Powwow. This is talking about a powwow, and this book is bilingual, and it is in English and Ojibwe, and that is really rare to see in today's books. And so it's just right there on the page. And I love that book. And it's just really cool. It's just talking about how they're going to a powwow, what a modern day powwow is like. So this is a really good book. If you've not gotten this, add this to your collection. I feel like I'm selling this book, but I'm telling you, this is a good book. Chapter books. This is the Birch Bark House. And this is one of the 2000 National Book Finalists. But what I would say about this is not one to read cover to cover. This is one you're going to pull excerpts out of. You can see this, that's a pretty thick book there. But I do have students that, like, as enrichment or just for extra, they would like to read that book from cover to cover, and that's fine. But we have included in our curriculum where we pull some of this out. Again, this is Shingabis, the Ojibwe legend. And then we also have 13 Moons on a Turtle's Back. This one in 1993 was a notable children's book in the language arts. So this is really cool also because Indigenous people don't tell time, didn't always tell time like we did. And so these 13 moons represent time periods. So one other book that I just wanted to share and highlight was this is The Night of the Full Moon. This is by Gloria Whalen, and she is a really well-known Michigan author. This is a chapter book as well, and there's another one that goes along with this about the Night of the Oriole, or the next spring in Oriole. These books are really small. They're like 60 pages, but they're still a chapter book. So you get a variety there. So those are just some of the books that we have tried to integrate and share. We're always looking for more. We're always trying to add more. One recently that we were looking at was I'm Not a Number, and that is a really fascinating book as well, because it really talks about just some of the mistreatment that Indigenous people have suffered when they were had to go to boarding schools and things like that. And I think that during this time period, as more social injustices are coming to light, I think it's important to make those pieces aware as well. So we also have this is the last Giants web resources, where this will link you to all of these wonderful resources that we have. I am going to just see if anybody has any questions, thoughts, or concerns.
I just want to add in really quickly that if you are feeling curious about any of the resources that we've shown you today, the Giants website is a great place for you to check out. And there's more than just third grade on the website. So there are other grade levels. I know everybody in here isn't a third grade teacher, but we would just point you to the website and also share with you that we do our best to make connections across the curriculum. So as Joy was pointing out, we work really hard to make connections to literacy, to reading and writing, as well as math. And then there's also a lot of great work in there around geography. So if you're feeling curious about any of that, you should definitely check out the website and just look through some of the resources that are offered, not just for third grade, but other grade levels.
Is it Joy?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if the books that you gave us tonight, if they're in digital format.
Well, if they are, any of them that are, we put that in the Giants resources as a link for a read aloud. If they were not, then because that was something that we thought about. So we're still kind of looking to see if we need to add that ourselves. But the ones that are, we have added as a read aloud link in the resources on the website of the Giants.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to tell everyone too, and I'm not trying to hijack the Giants presentation, but I am posted at the River Raisin National Battlefield Park and through my ISD. This summer, we're doing 2 summer institutes, and one is on boarding schools. And the other institute is on maple sugaring. And we're going to be including exhibits in our Giant Education Center about these 2 things. And if you want to get on virtual field trips and you would like to be included on my listserv, I'm going to put my email in the chat so that you can see what's going on at the battlefield. I'm directly involved with what we're developing there. And if you should ever desire to come and do an actual field trip with your students, once the Education Center is open, we'd love to have you.
Yes, and one thing I liked about that, I took my family there. It's a wonderful place, but they have a great vision of what they have planned to do and how they want to bring in the French fur traders and the whole Voyager area. They really have a good plan, good vision. They were when we were there, they were about to people across the street, had bought that property, those houses, and they had a couple more, and they had a good plan though. And I really appreciated their vision of making that a really good, authentic battlefield to come and check out what life was like during that time.
Yeah, it will be Monroe's version of Colonial Williamsburg when we get done over there. I've had a vision for that for a long time, and then when we were able to get the National Park Service to come in, it's just transformed things. And I think our community is going to be profoundly transformed, and we're going to have an opportunity to do the same for education. So it would be my pleasure if you all decided you wanted to sign up. I've got I can send you the link to the form that if you send me an email, I'll send you the link. Okay. Sorry if I took up too much time.
No, we're always looking to add more resources. So if we can make it authentic and know that that's part of it, then we would certainly love that. And we like to add virtual websites if we can, virtual field trips, because everybody can't. Michigan's a big state, so we can't always get to all these wonderful places. So it's great to share those in that venue as well. I love that you guys are sharing these resources also. This is a win-win for us as well. I think that I have looked at that one before. I wish they had more links online to some of these reading resources so we could get them in the hands of everyone, but we're working on it.
Are there any other wonderings or comments you want to share? We have about 8 minutes left until our session closes.
I'd like to thank you all for the work that that you've done on Giants. I refer all my teachers to the website here in Monroe County, and I appreciate the wonderful resource that it is to help teachers communicate the story. And it's also pleasing to me that you all are very concerned about making sure that the stories of Native peoples are the stories they want told, and that they're accurate. And that's so significant in embracing Native peoples in Michigan and living out the new standards that were approved in 2019. So thank you very much. You get a round of applause from me. Joy, where are you from? I detect a Southern accent.
What? Come on, really?
I do. My family is from the South, so I know it.
I am from South Carolina. I've been here for over 25 years. It's just not going away.
It's beautiful. It is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
My dad's family is from the Cumberland Gap. So.
Oh, we just went there on our way back from South Carolina. We stopped at that national park. Beautiful area.
So this is a weird sidebar, but I went. I'm from here, but I went to college down at Florida State, and I had people coming up to me and said, "You're from Michigan, aren't you?" Because of my accent. And I thought, I'm from the North. What? Like, we all talk like, no. You guys have a unique accent. It's like, okay.
Well, my cousins they lived in Indiana, so we always made fun of them saying, "Hi, you guys," and but because we don't say hi and we don't say guys and
And soft drinks are a Coke.
Yes, absolutely. What kind of Coke? Well, Coke. And that's because, Coke was in Atlanta, you know what I mean? So yes, everything was Coke, nothing was pop for sure. And people say, well, it was soda. I'm like, no, it was Coke. Coke, that's right.
My dad's home stood on the place where the sign is to go into the Cumberland Gap National Park.
Oh, wow.
They
Wow.
purchased my grandparents' home and for public domain, and
Oh,
they tore
okay.
it down. So
Interesting.
what kind
Interesting.
of history is in my blood?
Yeah, yeah. Wow. That's a cool place. Phil has some knowledge about Cumberland Gap area too. He did some work there and some research. He was stationed out there for a little while. Of course, Phil's been everywhere, so we're just riding on Phil's coattails. That's what we're doing.
So as we wrap up here, if you didn't get a chance to, please be sure to type your name in the chat so we can be sure you get your sketches. We won't be giving you your sketches, but the people who have more power and more control over the conference will be giving you your sketches. So please make sure you do that. And then we just want to thank you all so much for coming. We know that this is a late night and it's a lot, there have been a lot of long days. So thank you so much for coming, and please feel free to check out the Giants website or reach out if you have any questions about any of our work or want to know more.